Alright, let's solve find all duplicates in an array on LeetCode. In this problem, we're given an integer array nums of length n, where all the integer of nums are in the range 1 to n, and each integer appears at most twice. We need to return an array of all the integers that appear twice. And one more thing, we have to write an algorithm that runs in O of n time complexity and uses only constant auxiliary space. So in other words, has a space complexity of O of 1. So in this example, we have 3 that appears twice and the number 2 as well. So in our output, we return 2 and 3, and that's basically the gist of the problem. So the first way I thought about going about this problem was to create a map that stores the integer which we're currently on and a frequency that counts the number of times that number appears, and then we return in a list all the numbers that appear more than once, or in other words, all the keys that have a value equal to 2. And although that works and it does run in O of n time complexity, the space complexity of that is also O of n since we're using a hash map, so we can't use that approach. Now the actual solution to this problem is one that's quite tough to think about. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a list that stores the numbers that appear more than once, and that's the list that we're going to return. But the way that we're going to figure out if a number appears more than once is a little tricky at first, but once you get what we're doing, you'll find it easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of the fact that all the integers of the array are between 1 and n. And what we're going to do is on each element that we're on, we're going to take the absolute value of that number and subtract 1 from that number. The result is going to be stored in an integer variable called index. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look up the number located at that index, and we're going to check if that number is negative. If it's not negative, and you may be asking why would it be negative, that's because if the number is not negative, we're going to mark it as negative to suggest that this value, we've seen it, take account of it, and move on. So if we encounter a number that we haven't seen, we're going to mark it as negative and move on. And as we process other elements, if we hit a number and it's already negative, that means we've already seen it before. That means it's a duplicate, and we need to add that number to our list. So let's take a look at what that looks like in code, and then we'll go through this example to make sure everything is clear. So first and foremost, let's create our list of integer. We can call it result, doesn't really matter, which is equal to new linked list. Now we're going to loop through our nums array. So for int I equals to 0, as long as I is less than nums dot length I++, we're going to create an integer variable called index, which is equal to math.absolute of nums at I minus 1. Now we're going to check if nums at index is negative. That means we've already seen that number. We're going to add that number to our result list. Otherwise, we're going to mark that number as negative. So nums at index is going to be equal to negative nums at index. And then finally, all we need to do is return list. So let's go through example 1. I've written our nums array down here. Okay, so we created a new list called result. We're going to loop through our nums array, starting at int I equals to 0. So the index that we're going to look at is going to be equal to the absolute value of nums at I. So nums at 0, which is 4. Math.absolute of 4 is 4. Minus 1, that's 3. So our int index is 3. Now we're going to check if nums at 3 is negative. Let's take a look. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3. We're looking at the 7. It's not negative, so what are we going to do? We're going to mark it as negative, and we're going to increment our I. So now I is equal to 1. Our index is going to be equal to math.absolute of nums at 1, which is 3. 3 minus 1, that's 2. Index is equal to 2. Let's check if nums at 2 is negative. So this is 0, 1, 2. It's positive, so we're going to mark it as negative. and we're going to increment I. I is now equal to 2. Nums at 2 is negative 2, so the absolute value of negative 2 is 2. 2 minus 1, that's 1. So nums at 1 is 3. 3 is not negative, so mark it as negative and increment our for loop. I is now equal to 2. I is now equal to 3. So nums at 3, that's negative 7. Negative 7, absolute value is 7. 7 minus 1 is 6. Index is equal to 6. Let's look at nums at 6. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's not negative, so mark it as negative and go on. I is now equal to 4. So nums at 4, that's 8. 8 minus 1, that's 7. Index at nums at 7 is 1. It's not negative, so make it negative. Now I is equal to 5. Nums at 5 is 2. 2 minus 1, that's 1. Nums at 1 is negative 3. Since negative 3 or nums at index is negative, then we're going to add the absolute value, not the value itself. There we go. So now our list contains the value of 3, and we increment again. So now I is equal to 6. So nums at 6 is negative 3. Absolute value is 3. 3 minus 1 is 2. Nums at 2 is negative 2, which is already negative. So we're going to add it to our list as well. So now our list contains 3 and 2. And finally, I is equal to 7. That's negative 1. Absolute value of negative 1 is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. Nums at 0 is 4. And it's not negative, so we can mark it as negative, but that doesn't matter because once we increment, I is going to be greater than nums.length, and we're going to exit our for loop and return list, which contains 2 and 3. So let's submit our code and see if it works. Obviously, I called it result, not list. There we go. So that was the find all duplicates in an array problem on LeetCode. I hope you found that video helpful, and thanks for watching.